Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. The SABC Group Executive for News and Current Affairs, Moshoeshoe Monare, says a senior state security agency official called him demanding that he be vetted again and take a polygraph test. And when asked, no reason was provided. At the same time, the presidency denies that Monare is being targeted ahead of the upcoming elections. Presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya claims that Monare never completed his vetting process when he joined the SABC 2 years ago, which is compulsory for all executives.
Media freedom under the spotlight, this time involving the Public Broadcasters Group Executive for News and Current Affairs, Moshoeshoe Monare. Over the weekend, reports came out that Monare received a call from the SSA requesting that he be vetted again. But taking none of it, Monare says he subjected himself to a vetting process 2 years ago when he was appointed to the position. And he's surprised that he received a call 2 years later to undergo another vetting process, this time around, including a polygraph test.
I'm not special. I don't want to be treated, be given some privileged treatment. All I'm saying, explain to me. Put it in writing, and that's the law. It expects anyone making decisions to make that explanation.
To the SABC.
Earlier, the presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya held a media briefing and rebutted claims that Monare is targeted ahead of the 2024 general elections. Magwenya says Monare never completed his vetting process 2 years ago when he joined the SABC, and it's compulsory for all executives.
It is therefore not true that Mr. Monare is being targeted ahead of the elections. The vetting process does not cover practicing journalists or reporters at the SABC. Mr. Monare is not a reporter at the SABC. He is an executive. Upon his appointment, Mr. Monare gave consent to the vetting process and completed the form that was furnished to him and went further to submit some, but not all, of the information that was required. The process was then stalled when Mr. Monare did not want to submit himself to a polygraph test.
Veteran journalist Professor Anton Haber says the SSA must be called to back off.
He's in a key editorial position. So his independence as a journalist is of critical importance. And whether or not he's actually a reporter is irrelevant, because there are lots of editorial people who are not reporters.
Magwenya's comments follow news articles that Monare was under scrutiny for the negative publicity against the ANC leading up to the elections. But Monare has reiterated that he does not have a problem with being vetted as long as reasons are provided. Ntlantla Khatlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, let's get some reaction now. We speak to Director of Media Monitoring Africa, William Bird. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time, William. There's been a lot of concerns around the latest attempts by the State Security Agency to vet the SABC head of news. What's your reaction to this?
Well, obviously, we're deeply concerned about it. It's fundamentally an unacceptable scenario to be suggesting that the editor-in-chief of the SABC has to go through some high-level vetting, and that includes a polygraph test. We've seen the presidency's suggestion that this is because he didn't complete a process that began 2 years ago, which just seems laughably ridiculous in the face of the fact that he's been in the position for 2 years. It's a very worrying development, and certainly something that we need to see a level of accountability on.
What would you say? I mean, yes, the timing of this request raises a few eyebrows and very confusing as to why now, when it could have been done last year, for instance. What does such a move now signify, more so in its underlying message around media freedom and South Africa's hard-earned democracy?
Well, it indicates a number of things. Firstly, it indicates a fundamental misunderstanding of the Critical Infrastructure Act, which talks about and applies to security personnel. That does not talk about senior executives at infrastructure that need to be vetted. So the fact that Mr. Monare was expected to be vetted to begin with, and that they're then coming back to him 2 years and then expecting different and new levels of tests, including a polygraph, suggests that something else is afoot. What we need to know is who ordered this particular version to be implemented, and what were they thinking. We need to know what action government is going to take against it. We need to see clear and unambiguous condemnation of this from the Presidency and, in fact, from the Department of Communication and Digital Technology. Anything less than that would suggest active complicity and support of an act that is clearly one that is designed and intended to undermine the editorial independence of the SABC.
Of course, we cannot ignore the fact that elections are just a matter of weeks away. Why is it so crucial, as you make, the suggestions you're making, that media are able to perform their duties, for one, more so during an election year, without fear or intimidation?
So the SABC is always going to be a contested space, right? It speaks to the biggest audiences in the country. Its radio speaks to half the population. The editor-in-chief holds a very important position in relation to that. They have to make sure, the SABC collectively, that their coverage overall is free, fair, and credible and accurate, and that they're not giving and not favouring any particular political party. That's their job during an election period. So for this to come now, it detracts if nothing else, it detracts the attention of the editor-in-chief away from his day job, which should be around making sure that SABC fulfills its mandate. So now having to focus and spend time, going around worrying about whether or not he needs to comply with what is patently a ridiculous instruction. So it's really important that the SABC is all hands on deck, and that there's not any sense that the SABC is pandering to any one side. Bear in mind, if you belong to one of the other political parties, you'll see this as a clear attempt to go and say, well, the SABC, they're trying to get them to not favour our parties. And if you bring the credibility of the SABC into doubt, if people believe that they're no longer able to cover the elections fairly and in a balanced and accurate manner, that can have a material negative impact on the elections, and that clearly is a threat to democracy.
Very well. You make some recommendations for some action and accountability. Of course, the time factor is one of concern, because elections are only a matter of days away from you and I as we speak. What do you think needs to happen quite urgently at this point in time in these efforts, of course, to almost shift the focus away from the elections being, at the forefront of the plans that need to take place in the newsroom?
They need to deal with this swiftly and quickly. You don't need a long investigation. Suggesting that the editor-in-chief, why would any editor in South Africa have to submit themselves for security vetting, let alone that of the public broadcaster? It's suggesting, it's not a difficult thing here. Critical Infrastructure Act doesn't apply to journalists, and certainly not to the editor-in-chief of the SABC. So the first thing to do is to say, yes, this is a huge mistake, or this was a huge error. This is what we're doing to rectify it. As the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies, we strongly distance ourselves from this. We condemn it, and we are finding out who is behind it. The SSA needs to come clean. The Presidency needs to revise their position on this. They made a statement about it today, which was frankly not representative of something that you'd hope would come out of the Presidency on this particular issue. It was either embarrassing, or it was plainly out of touch with what the reality is on the ground. So we need action. We need this to be this position to be made clear, and for the person or persons behind it to be identified, and disciplinary action taken against them. Failing this, we already in discussions with our lawyers about potential legal action. We can't tolerate a situation where these kinds of moves are being made 4 weeks ahead of elections.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion. Director of Media Monitoring Africa, William Bird, helping us make sense of some of the latest attempts by the State Security Agency to vet the SABC head of news, Moshoeshoe Monare, of course. And speaking about the action that is likely to take place, should there not be some sort of accountability insofar as that matter is concerned?